What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that is Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me for yet another episode of the UNC Football Show, it's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, exciting show ahead once again, man. We're going to preview Carolina's matchup in Kenan Stadium against Georgia Tech, 5:30 p.m. kickoff. That game will be on ESPN2 on Saturday. We're going to talk about that one a little bit later in the podcast, as we always do, look back on some kind of game week storylines. So really excited to dive in to yet another episode of the UNC Football Show, like I said earlier. So another exciting show ahead. AJ, real quickly before we dive into it, Carolina sitting at number 13 nationally, 9-1, 6-0 in ACC play. Georgia Tech coming in 4-6, 3-4 in ACC play, coming off a loss to Miami. So a struggling Georgia Tech team, like I mentioned, we'll dive into them a little bit more and a little bit later in the show. So like we always do, AJ, let's look back a little bit. I think we have to kind of hit on the fact that Carolina secured the Coastal Division Championship in Winston-Salem against Wake Forest last Saturday. I know we talked about it in our Three Things video, but we haven't really had a chance to just talk about it a little bit more since then and what it means for the program. So obviously, first time Carolina's won it since 2015. It's a big-time accomplishment for this team and this program, especially when you consider the fact that they did it with 2 games to go. It didn't go down to the wire. I think that always speaks to just how good this team has been in ACC play and their ability to find ways to win in ACC play, which is why they're sitting where they are right now at 6-0 in conference play. So, AJ, what are your initial thoughts on Carolina winning the Coastal, what it means for the program, and just, how big of an accomplishment it is for, Mac Brown, and what is it now, year 4? I can't even keep up anymore. It feels just everything jumbled together.
You remember after Notre Dame, one of the narratives, and it was a narrative I discussed, was that, okay, game 4, year 4, where is this program?
Yeah,
and
it's a valid question.
There was a lot of negativity. And 6 games since then, they have won each time, and they're the Coastal Division champions. It's not a great division, but someone has to be a champion. So why not go ahead and take advantage and beat everybody? If you go unbeaten and you went out in that division and you're the champs, then people could say competition all they want. But if you're 11-1 and you're 8-0 in league play, then you're 11-1 and 8-0 in league play. And let's remember, their 2 crossover opponents have been ranked almost all year. So Wake has arguably one of its best quarterbacks of all time. State has NFL guys all over the place. So if they beat State and they finish 8-0, those are 2 good wins crossing over into the Atlantic, which everyone has said all year is so much better than the Coastal. So I think that would validate everything a little bit more. To me, it goes back to what I wrote the other night in my column after the game in Winston-Salem, is that, this is what Mac came back for. He didn't come back here because he needed the money. I know I don't want to, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. He didn't come back because it's a hobby. He didn't come back because he and Sally were bored and they needed young dudes to hang around with. He didn't come back because he loves wearing Carolina blue stuff every day of his life. He didn't come back for any of those reasons. He came back because he wanted to complete unfinished business at North Carolina. I don't know this for a fact, but I suspect that as he's gone on in his career and he's had a chance to look back at things, the way the program just fell over a cliff the moment he walked away has probably bothered him some. And I know it has a little bit. I don't think he feels responsible for it because he had no obligation to stay at UNC, especially under the conditions of a conversation he had before he left, which is partly why he left. But he saw where the program was. He knows it has so much potential to be where it was at the end of his first time at Carolina, and he wanted to get it back there. And I'll tell you this, and again, this is not inside information. I've had conversations with the MAC, but obviously never about this. Maybe one day I will. I think he's a very competitive man. And I think part of what he wants, if there's anything personal he wants out of this, is to kind of stick it to a few people. His last few years at Texas, he was treated like crap. And if you go back and look at Texas football in the 17 years before Mac got there, and look at the mess it's been since he left, they were awesome when he was there. He was one of the greatest coaches in the history of a program that is loaded with college football history. But they haven't been anything bookending the Mac tenure. And I don't think he gets enough credit for being a great coach. And I think he knows that. And if he can take North Carolina a second time into the top 5 and have it positioned to contend for a national championship and have it look like it's a sustainable situation, I think he would get some personal satisfaction. I know he's all about the kids. I know he's all about the program and all that kind of stuff, but we all have personal drives. We all have personal satisfaction points. And I think that would be one for him. I think part of him, if they ought to be really good next year. So let's say they do close out 11-1, they win a bowl game and they finish in the top 10. It'll be a lot like 96, where they just kept winning and winning, ended up in the top 10, ended up at number 10, and then they were primed the next year for a massive season. That will happen next year. So if let's say he just leaves after 5 years, well, year 2, Orange Bowl, year 3, top 10, or year 4, top 10, year 5, they contend for a national championship with maybe a Heisman frontrunner or maybe even a returning Heisman winner. To me, that's what the Coastal Division title means. It is a stepping stone in that process. And when he says, look, this is just one thing, I get it. A lot of teams would be very satisfied with that, but they're not, because he's not, because he knows there can be a lot more done. If you can become a national power at Oregon, you can become a national power at North Carolina. And I'm not disparaging Oregon. Carolina's got more inherent advantages in a lot of ways because of talent pool, location, and everything else. So you can win at a lot of places in college football that don't consistently win or hadn't in the past, like Oregon, and then you're a power for a long time. North Carolina can do that. And Mac knows they can do that. It's one of the reasons he came back. He had him there before, and he's in the process of getting the program back there again.
Yeah, I think it's key what you said. I think he talked about in his Monday press conference too that, winning the Coastal is great, but it's not why he came. He didn't come back to just win the Coastal Division. He came back to win an ACC, compete for an ACC championship on a regular basis, and compete at the national stage. That's still the goal that Carolina's trying to get to. Now, they've done a really good job so far winning the Coastal. They put themselves in that position to potentially win an ACC championship. But again, we talked about it before the year. I think you mentioned it on Saturday that this program is kind of back on schedule to where you would think Mac Brown would have wanted it to be year 4 because they've won the Coastal. They're 9-1. They're 6-0 in ACC play. We talked about it all preseason, AJ. Next year is really the year where you'd expect Carolina to be really, really good when you look at just who they're returning and the key guys that they'll have back. But a big accomplishment for Mac Brown, a big accomplishment for the program. But like you said, by no means the end-all, be-all. It's not like he's satisfied now that he wants to win more and more.
Well, right now they're sitting at 9 wins, which is their second most wins in a season since Mac left.
I know.
The other was 2015 when Larry's team won 11 straight and won the Coastal and almost beat Clemson in the ACC title game. Almost got to the CFP. Very similar situation with what this team's dealing with. And that club played 2 FCS teams, and they were kind of criticized for their schedule, but they got a chance to play Clemson on the big stage, and they nearly beat them. So they get that onside kick. With the way Marquise was playing, I would give them a pretty good shot that night. But that's in the past. This is where they are now. I think absolutely they should beat Georgia Tech, get to 10 wins. This program has had a pretty good history of having at least one 10-win season in a lot of different decades. They can do it again. It's only happened once in the last 25 years. So maybe this thing's getting revved up. And it appears to me this is getting revved up. Most of the most talented kids, by and large, are younger in this program. They're starting to play more. The recruiting, a lot of people have been critical of the class of 23, but I can assure you that some big-time kids that kind of not too interested back in the summer have called back and are showing interest again. So don't be surprised if there are a few flips from some noteworthy prospects in the class of 23 that end up in Carolina's hands. And they can, 24, they can have a fantastic class because they will parlay this and the expectations of next year into something significant on the trail. So I think the program's in really good shape. That question was asked after Notre Dame, and I think in the last 6 weeks it's been answered. Like 6 games, it's been answered. There's still more. I mean, if they turn around and lose to Georgia Tech, we'll all bring out our hammers and whack them over the head with it, justifiably so. Yeah, but I think right now, at this moment, since we cannot see into the future, I think everything is on track.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Winning solves everything, particularly with recruiting as well. It's a very cliched term, but it's one of my favorite quotes all the time because, God, it's so true. But yeah,
Solves
first
a
10 win.
lot. Not everything,
Yeah,
but it solves a lot.
it damn sure solves a lot. First 10 win season, like you mentioned, since 2015. Second time Carolina's won 10 games or more since 1997. So Carolina will be trying to do that against Georgia Tech this Saturday. Real quickly, AJ, before we move on to the preview, I want to talk about kind of the theme for this week. Mac Brown touched on it a lot. It's handling prosperity, and I think that's such an accurate thing that Carolina's going to be trying to do this week. You know, they've won the Coastal. They got it 2 games in hand. You got State coming up the next week after. I know some people are kind of labeling this as a classic trap game, which I can understand in some ways. I don't think I think Carolina will be ready for this game, but you can understand why people would be saying that when you look at the game that, you know, came before it and it's coming after it. But again, it's about handling prosperity. That's something this program and even this team during individual games has struggled to do. And it's something they're going to have to continue to do when you look at what's ahead. So I think that is an appropriate theme for Mac this week. And I think it's going to be an interesting kind of storyline to watch on Saturday. How does this team handle being the Coastal Division champs and still having to go out there and play and compete and win games to reach their ultimate goal?
Well, this actually connects to what we were just talking about. As he continues to build this thing, you have to have the culture to build, right? So I think the culture's there right now. And it needs to get stronger, and it will get stronger. He said this is a player-led team. And I asked him, and this is feeding into what you asked me. Okay. I asked him Monday, I said, okay, you have built 2 other programs from shambles pretty much to national prominence, a sustainable prominence at Carolina and at Texas. Mm-hmm. I said, did you have comparable player-led teams during the pivotal periods of those rebuilding projects, which I think is where Carolina is right now? And he said, yes. He said, this is comparable to what he had at Carolina when he got it going and when he had at Texas when he got it going. And if it wasn't, he would say it's not. So I think that a lot of people think, oh, it's just coach speak. No, I think because he now they're at a point where they've got some currency because they're winning games and they got a Coastal Division title. So why would a coach, set up the fan base, set up the media for something that maybe they're not ready for? Because that would just bring on more criticism if it doesn't happen. So I think he's been very genuine about that. He loves the fact this is a player-led team. Remember, after Notre Dame, the next day, the defensive players got together and had a meeting, and the team has been different. We haven't seen the incidents on the field or the sideline that we saw up to that point. The kids have handled a lot of things internally well. It's almost like, baseball, they have a thing called the kangaroo court, where there's a couple of veterans in each clubhouse. They're sort of responsible for maintaining order, and guys get fined and things like that if they don't do it. And I remember Don Baylor was a great one back in the day. I'm showing my age here, but I think they kind of have something similar like that at Carolina, which has happened organically. It wasn't like the head coach says, okay, you guys are the leaders of the kangaroo court here. It just happened organically, which is the best way because it's real. Mm-hmm. So yes, handling prosperity is a part of that. In order for this program to take the next step, it can't be satisfied with the Coastal. It can't be satisfied with 9 or 10 wins or whatever the case is. They have to recognize that the mission statement of the program when Mac returned is sort of in front of them now. Hadn't really been in front of them before, but it sort of is now, and that is to become a national contender. That's plain and simple. So they're a lot closer to that on the field and performance with the record. They're 13th in the CFP. They've got a major Heisman contender. They're in that neighborhood. So in order to stay in that neighborhood, they can't slip back this week. They have to be focused. And I do think the fact that Georgia Tech beat the living crap out of them last year, humiliated them in the Mercedes-Benz Dome Stadium or whatever they call that, I think that helps. I think it helps her playing a team that really, really I think gave them the worst loss of Mac Part 2 era. That was the worst performance. That was the worst loss. That was perplexing. That's when Mac realized, okay, this group just doesn't have it. That happened because they weren't a very good player-led team at all. So we're going to contrast that game last year to this week. Remember, they were coming off the route of Virginia last year when Sam was running the ball. All of a sudden, everyone says, hey, maybe they're back on track now. Everyone was talking about 2015 when they lost a close, ugly game to South Carolina in the opener, then they ran off 11 straight wins. But that didn't happen. Georgia Tech kind of threw the dirt on them, essentially. That team was done after that. Barely made a bowl game, but they should have been a lot better than they were, but they weren't ready for the moment. So we'll see if this team is ready for the moment and handling prosperity. I have a feeling that they are. I don't know how much they are, but certainly enough to get by this week.
Yeah, I have the same vibe as well. Mac, I got to give a shout out to Mac Brown too. Quote of the week from him on Monday said when he went back and watched the Georgia Tech highlights and about puked, I think is what he said. So I thought that was one of the funniest quotes he said all season. So if I had to hand out a quote of the week, Mac Brown's definitely getting it. I thought that was hilarious from him because you were there. It was horrible.
Yeah, my memory of that game, when I think about that game, I just think of Sam Howell getting up off the field after getting sacked again, and like guys running to the sideline. He just kind of gets up and he just does that little Sam jog over there, and his last one to the sideline because it was 3rd down and 3rd and 9. He got sacked for a loss of 8 yards. So and Kieran had to come in and boom a few. So that's that, and also I think the signature play of the Bateman era was one of Jess Sims' touchdowns in that game, where if you go back, it was like at the 2 or 3 yard line. Tech had the ball, and Sims took the shotgun, ran it in, and scored. And he didn't celebrate right away because he figured that the play didn't count because none of Carolina's 11 defenders were set. They were all looking at the sideline. And he figured, well, that must not have counted, but it did count. They just weren't ready. And that, to me, that's the other thing I remember. And afterward, Jeremiah Gemmel saying they didn't prepare for Jeff Sims, even though he was clearly the best quarterback at Georgia Tech. He was one of their reps at the ACC kickoff. But he had been hurt, but he was cleared the week before against Clemson. He just didn't play. But they didn't prepare for him. So I think this program is so far removed from that day in Atlanta right now. And I think we'll see that come through this weekend.
No doubt. And guys, we're going to talk about Drake May's Heisman campaign and that and the stories around that in a different podcast. So we're not going to do that in here. We're going to go ahead and move on to the preview. But before we do that, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast. They've been sponsoring all of our UNC football shows throughout the season. And that's myperfectfranchise.net, guys. If you're looking to diversify, looking to leave the corporate rat race, to gain control of your own income and wealth, or what about having unlimited PTO and the ability to create income and wealth on your own? Well, guys, look no further than My Perfect Franchise. I'm going to throw this in here, too. We put out 2 podcasts, one shorter one and one longer one a little bit earlier this week, where AJ sat down with Andy Ludicky, who's the founder and owner of My Perfect Franchise. Really nice conversation. He goes in depth about what they do, what kind of different franchises you can get involved with, how you can get involved, and just some of the benefits of doing so, and also gives a lot of insight on his background, which is really impressive once you hear from it. So Andy, founder and owner, can guide you through a free comprehensive franchise evaluation to see if operating a franchise is something that's right for you. He has a ton of experience. And I'm going to throw this in here as well. Massive Mac Brown fan. So if you do end up talking to him, make sure you talk a little Mac with him and make sure you tell him that THI sent you as well. But definitely go listen to those podcasts. You're interested in learning more. Franchises, a lot of people just think restaurants. It's not just restaurants. I learned a lot from just listening to that podcast. It's retail stores, can be car washes, cleaning businesses. There's so many different franchises out there that you don't really realize are franchises until you talk to someone like Andy, who's got an extensive knowledge on it. So definitely go check those podcasts out. I'll put a link to his website below. And if I can remember, which I should be able to remember, I'll try to link those podcasts in our description as well. We should tell everybody why he's a big Mac Brown fan. Some people are thinking, he's a huge hook 'em horns guy. Yeah, Texas guy. And I thought I'd mention that. And when he and I were talking before we did those little videos, we have a short one and a little bit longer one. We were talking about Mac, and he's like, he goes, Mac got a bum deal. He goes, look at what they've been like since Mac. He says, look at what Carolina's doing now, and then look at Texas. Yeah. So he's actually met Mac. Got a photo with him. He actually has in his office. I didn't see the photo when I was doing that, but he said he got a photo with him one time, and I think he's a donor to Texas. So, nice. Donors get photos. So, but he's pulling hard for Carolina because he loves Mac so much. Yeah, I'm about to say, man, he might be on the Mac Brown bandwagon now with how good he's doing at North Carolina. So, guys, make sure you check it out. I guess he's a low-end Matthew McConaughey, right? Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Matthew McConaughey's about the super fan over there at Texas, and I'm super donor. I should probably throw in there. Super Mac Brown fan, too. Yeah. No doubt about that. Check them out. MyPerfectFranchise.net. Link is in the description below. Okay, let's dive into Georgia Tech. Obviously, head coach, I'm sure for those who don't know, I'm sure most of you know, head coach Jeff Collins was fired earlier this year in September. Brent Key is in as the interim head coach, was on his staff. Focusing on the offense, AJ, I think this is where the game's going to be won for North Carolina, potentially lost for North Carolina if they don't show up. Third to last in total offense in the ACC. Georgia Tech is averaging 328 yards per game. Second to last in the conference in scoring offense, scoring just 17.1 points per, and the worst passing team in the ACC right now. This is interesting part about it, though. QB Jeff Sims out indefinitely. It was announced earlier this week. Zach Pyron, who was the backup quarterback, is out for the season as well. Been starting some games for them. He's out with a broken collarbone. So Georgia Tech announcing sophomore Zach Gibson is going to be starting at QB for Georgia Tech this week. He did play in their loss to Miami last week. 12 completions, 120 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. So that, to me, is the interesting thing to watch. It kind of gives me a similar vibe, and we can hit on it after I hit on the defense, AJ, of going into the Virginia Tech game, because I'm going to throw the anemic word out here. You're dealing with an anemic offense who's dipping down into their third string quarterback. That's something Virginia Tech didn't even have to worry about. They were rolling with their starting quarterback there, but it's a team that has really struggled to score points and move the ball offensively. And I think when you look at how much the defense has struggled as well, I think that's why Carolina has a good shot to be a very similar scoreline to what we saw against Virginia Tech earlier this year. Second to last in total defense, 404.7 yards per game. Third to last in scoring defense in the ACC, 28.7 per, and fifth. One positive stat that Mac Brown did hit on Georgia Tech about defense, so they are fifth in the NCAA in turnover margin. Yeah, they have forced 22 turnovers this year, which is hard to believe when you look at how bad they've been defensively for most of this season, just statistically. But 3 players to focus on, AJ, before I kick it to you on defense. Linebacker Allende Ely leads team in tackles, 98, and is second in sacks with 3.5, big-time prospect for them. Linebacker Charlie Thomas is second in tackles with 97, and the defensive lineman Keon White, who's a big-time D lineman for them, leads the team in sacks with 4.5 and is third on the team in tackles. So a defense that struggled, but definitely some individual players on there that have a really good shot at playing in the next level, some really talented kids. So, AJ, I'm getting Virginia Tech vibes from this game. I know it's the potential for a trap game. I don't believe in it sometimes, and I do believe in it sometimes. I think this is an opportunity where something like that can happen coming off an emotional game, emotional win against Wake Forest. It gives you the Coastal Division, and with State looking ahead. But I think this team, like we've talked about, player-led team, a team that's proven they've kind of taken everything week by week this season, has been able to deal with a lot of adversity. I'm expecting Carolina to win this one relatively comfortably, but they have to be ready and they have to be prepared against this Georgia Tech team.
Those 3 defensive players you mentioned are NFL guys.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Talented
so
kids,
their defense is pretty good. The offense has put them in some bad spots.
Yeah.
But, and look, some of those games, when you know your offense isn't going to score, it's a challenge to get back out there and get stop after stop after stop.
Yeah,
so,
it's mentally tough. Yeah.
We've talked and written about complementary play, offense and defense complementing each other, and you're both are better when they do that because they lift each other up, and I don't think the offense has lifted up the defense there very often there. Now, when I was asking questions last night to some players yesterday evening for the basketball game, and then this morning, we're doing this on Wednesday evening, this morning, when we talked to Jahvaree Ritzie, I asked about the challenge of preparing for 2 different quarterbacks. I didn't realize that Pyron had been listed as out for the year. So I don't really think it matters, to be honest with you, who the quarterback is. Jeff Sims could cause some problems, no doubt about it. But there's some issues going on there with him. Carolina just has to worry about itself. They have to take care of their own business, and they'll be fine. Are they ready? Are they a player-led team? I think a player-led team doesn't have that dip this week. They may not play great like at UVA 2 weeks ago, but they should be better than they were at UVA. Mac actually said he used that as an example Sunday when he talked to the team about steering the nose in the direction of the Georgia Tech game. So look, you didn't have a great week of practice for UVA. Didn't have a very good performance against a terrible team that played way above its norm offensively against Tar Heels. So The difference is they did have Brennan Armstrong still. They still had some pretty talented skill guys. Georgia Tech just doesn't have much at all offensively. So this should be a game where Carolina's defense is pretty good all the way through, like it was against Virginia Tech, like you said. Offensively, I still think they should strike, and they've got a lot to play for. The Heisman is a team award, and Kamara Morales talked about that yesterday, that he's like, look, we take a lot of pride in him being up there. We're helping him being Drake, be in that mention, be one of the top candidates for the Heisman, because they all have to do their jobs. I mean, if nobody's open, Drake can't throw it to them. If they don't catch the ball, then they're not completions, and Drake gets an incompletion instead. So I think that they've got a lot to play for. I do believe, going back to what we were saying earlier, I think this club has a bigger vision. They have a bigger mandate for themselves. So they should handle things this week. Will it be challenging? Yeah, I think Georgia Tech's going to come out and be very physical early, because they know that the physicality got to Carolina a year ago. They were very physical out of the gate, and Carolina struggled. So that's their thing. They got to come out punching. They don't want to win a 4-round game. They have to come out in the first round, if you will, and just body blow, head shots, all that kind of stuff. See if they can knock Carolina on its heels, no pun intended. That's their hope. And that's what they're going to come out and try to do. So Carolina has to handle that. And if they can score with Tech doing that and score quite a few times early, I think this game could be a cakewalk. This might be an opportunity for some guys to get in that don't normally get in. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, this is Carolina football. This is a team that has played a lot of close games, but most of those are on the road. I mean, they rolled late against Pitt. They handled Virginia Tech. So I really want to see if this defense keeps Georgia Tech at or below its norm.
Yeah.
That'll be key. And I got to throw this out. I got to give a shout out to the defense on this, though. I was crunching the numbers earlier today. They gave up 40 points in the fourth quarter at App State. The whole world knows it, right? They've played 8 games since then. And in the 8 fourth quarters combined, they've given up 38 points.
Wow. It's improvement, man.
And 4 times they've shut out their opponent in the fourth quarter since then. Mm-hmm. So I think that these guys, the resiliency of working through rough spots, rough stretches during games, and coming out and having the right frame of mind and the fortitude to carry on into the fourth quarter and play their best football at times is an indication of the culture that Mac's talking about, the player-led culture and the pride factor in the program. And I think you got to credit Gene Chizik too. So they have been getting better, and they've been good at the most important parts of games to get wins. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the defense does. They need to have one of these total clamp down, improve the stats type games. And I think this Saturday affords them one of those opportunities. Yeah,
no doubt about it. I think so too. Let's wrap it up real quick, AJ. Let's do prediction time before we wrap this one up. I'm saying 38-21. I think it could be a lot bigger margin than that. I think Carolina could score a lot more points than that. The only reason I'm thinking with that 38-21 scoreline is Carolina gets up something like maybe 38-14, takes some of the starters out on offense and on defense. Maybe Georgia Tech scores a late touchdown to make it 21. So I'm saying 38-21, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina wins by a bigger margin. And like you said, I think you'd like to see Georgia Tech score less than 21 points when you look at the fact third-string quarterback offense has really struggled this year. You'd hope Carolina could play a little bit better, but if you get that late touchdown in there, then it changes it up a lot as well. So I'm saying 38-21 Tar Heels getting to that 10-win mark, and throwing this in there as well, Mac Brown getting his 100th win as the head coach at North Carolina. So it'll be a pretty fun day in Chapel Hill if that happens. So what are you thinking for this one?
I think Carolina needs style points. I think Drake needs style points. I think the team needs style points, because there's still a lot of losses that could happen in front of them.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I heard what Reese Davis said last night when I was driving home from the Dean Dome at 3:00 in the morning, when I turned on ESPN radio or ESPNU radio, and he kept going back to Carolina because they are 9-1 and they have an opportunity to play an extremely high-profile game in Charlotte, which will be big for Drake and big for the team. So they're not totally out of it, but they need style points. They have to do some things to distinguish themselves from just being a club that gets by Coastal Division teams, which they've been doing on the road. So, or just ACC teams in general. So they need style points. They need to rock Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they need to just annihilate them. And I'm not being disrespectful to Georgia Tech at all. And by the way, Brent Key is 3-3 since Collins was fired. This team's played a lot better. Collins was a disaster. Should have been fired. Should have been fired last year. I don't know why they waited, but Brent Key has kept it together there. That's why I know they're going to come out playing hard. But Carolina just needs to punk somebody. They need to win big. They need to rack up some numbers, and they need style points. I don't think that Mac's sitting in his office right now saying we need style points this weekend. But if the opportunity is there, because they're going for some things beyond just the win, I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of keep those guys in a little bit longer to get some of that stuff. If Drake's at 285 and they're up 38-14, I would imagine he stays in to go over 300. That's just my guess. Mm-hmm. And I know that typically coaches don't do that. And I know that typically this coach doesn't do that. But sometimes when you get to this point in the season and there's some carrots out there dangling, you got to go for the carrot, man. So I think that they just might do that.
Yeah, and Carolina's officially launched their Drake May for Heisman campaign as well, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if they ended up doing it. And he, deserves to be in consideration if he keeps playing like he has, because he's been fantastic this season. We'll hit on that in another podcast as well. We're going to do here shortly, so make sure you stay tuned for that podcast as well. AJ, real quickly too, before we wrap this one up officially, military appreciation game for Carolina on Saturday, and throwing this into there as well. Carolina will be able to wear UVA decals on their helmets as well. Really sad news out of Charlottesville earlier this week with, three UVA football players being shot and killed in Charlottesville. So prayers out to all the victims, prayers out to all the families, for everybody here at THI. I think I speak on behalf of all of us, but just really sad news and just so senseless and unnecessary. But prayers out to UVA, the whole fan base, and as well with the players and their families. Yeah,
I'm totally with you. It hits differently when it's athletes for me, because I'm around young athletes, been around them most of my life, and they seem indestructible. And I was talking with somebody over at Carolina on Monday before Max Presser. I said, they seem indestructible, and so much about their being is reaching potential, is becoming better, is ascending, because that's what they do in athletics. That's what we write about. And that's how we chronicle them. And then to have it cut out like that, it's just, there's no words.
No.
And not just Carolina, everybody in the ACC is wearing those decals. The league's sending them out today or tomorrow, so they'll be on all the helmets.
I'm glad they're. I know there's been a lot of stuff around the country. I know Carolina's game against Gardner Webb, they had a moment of silence. Correct me if I'm wrong, before the game and everything like that. So I would be shocked if there wasn't a moment of silence on Saturday for UVA.
And they're not playing. They're not playing Coastal this weekend. And I don't know. I don't even know if they'll play Virginia Tech. I can't even imagine. I got a few good buddies that cover UVA, and I haven't talked to them yet because I'm leaving them alone, because they're journalistically, you get flipped on your head. And I'll eventually reach out and talk to them. But man, it's tough. Poor parents.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
By the way, Max said today that his daughter's a professor.
Yeah, daughter's a professor up there,
and she parks at the garage where the shooting took place.
Oh, geez, Louise! Wow. Yeah. God, man, it's just so. I had my dad and my brother up there a couple weeks ago.
And also, I might as well throw this out there too. The police chief there is Phil Longo's cousin.
I thought I saw him on camera, and they kind of looked alike. They had the same last name. They even kind of had the same haircut. And I actually thought about that. I was like, they've got to be related somehow. That's wild, man. And again, just from everybody at THI, prayers up to all the victims, their families, and everything. I just hope everybody can get through this and to the UVA program as well. It's just such sad and senseless news out of Charlottesville, and I'm glad to see people around the country are speaking out and honoring them and like they've been doing. So that's really good to see. But AJ, good place to wrap this one up, man. It's a little bit of a somber note to wrap it up. We had to hit on that real quickly. It wouldn't be right for us not to at least talk about that for a second. So I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones for another episode of the UNC Football Show. We appreciate you watching. As always, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well. We'll do this as we do every week. Go ahead and like the video below if you think Carolina is going to get to 10 wins on Saturday and beat Georgia Tech in Kenan Stadium. And heck, if you're going to be there on Saturday too, go ahead and like this video as well. Let's see how many likes we can get on this one. Appreciate you watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks.